Document. Part 1. The stars stretched endlessly across the black void of space, cold and distant. The exploration vessel Eclipse Dawn drifted silently through the emptiness, its crew weary from weeks of fruitless searching. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the monitors before him. He was a tall man with short brown hair streaked with gray, his face lined with years of hard decisions and sleepless nights. Beside him, Laura Bennett, his second in command, leaned over a console, her fingers moving swiftly across the controls. "Anything yet?" Daniel asked, his voice calm but tinged with frustration. Laura shook her head without looking up. "Nothing. Just more rocks and dust. If there's anything out here worth finding, it's hiding well." Daniel sighed and turned to look out the viewport. Space was vast, mercilessly so. It had been months since they left Earth on this mission, tasked with mapping uncharted regions of the galaxy. So far, their journey had yielded little more than empty star systems and dead planets. But deep down, Daniel held on to hope. Every explorer did. It was what kept them going when the silence of the cosmos pressed in too tightly. Just then, a faint blip appeared on one of the screens. Laura straightened immediately, her focus snapping to attention. "Wait, I've got something. Out at the edge of our sensors. Big, really big." Daniel stepped closer, his brow furrowing as he studied the readings. "What is it?" "I'm not sure," Laura admitted, adjusting the settings on the scanner. "It's massive, bigger than any asteroid or comet we've seen before, and it's not natural. Look at these shapes." She pointed two jagged lines appearing on the display. "Whatever it is, it's artificial." A spark of excitement lit up Daniel's face. "Bring us closer. Let's see what we're dealing with." The Eclipse Dawn shifted course, its engines humming softly as it moved toward the mysterious object. As they drew nearer, details began to emerge. At first, it looked like a mountain floating in space, dark and craggy against the backdrop of stars. But as the ship's lights illuminated it, the truth became clear. This was no random piece of debris. It was a ship, a colossal, ancient warship. Daniel let out a low whistle. "That thing must be kilometers long," an old Laura added, her tone hushed with awe. "Look at those markings." She zoomed in on the hull, revealing intricate patterns etched into the metal. Strange symbols glowed faintly with an eerie blue light, pulsing rhythmically as if alive. I've never seen anything like it. The ship was unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Its design was brutal and imposing, all sharp angles and heavy armor plating. It looked like it had been built for war, every inch of it radiating power and menace. Yet despite its size and apparent strength, parts of the hull were scarred and battered, evidence of battles fought long ago. "Can we get a closer look?" Daniel asked. Laura nodded and adjusted the controls. The Eclipse Dawn approached cautiously, its scanners working overtime to gather data. What they found only deepened the mystery. The ship's energy signature was weak, almost non-existent, suggesting it had been adrift for centuries. But buried beneath layers of damage and decay, traces of activity remained, faint signals that hinted at life aboard. "Life signs?" Daniel questioned, his voice rising slightly. "It's possible," Laura replied, her expression tense, "but they're faint. Could just be residual readings from automated systems, or..." She hesitated, unsure how to finish the thought. "Or someone or something is still alive in there," Daniel finished for her. He stared at the monstrous vessel, his mind racing. This discovery could change everything. If there were survivors or even remnants of an advanced civilization, they might hold answers to questions humanity had been asking for centuries. But there was also danger. No one knew what they would find inside. "We need to board it," Daniel said finally, making his decision. Laura turned to him, her eyes wide. "Are you sure? We don't know what kind of condition that ship is in. It could fall apart around us." "I didn't say it wouldn't be risky," Daniel admitted. "But we didn't come all this way to turn back now. Prep a team. Take minimal gear, just enough to explore safely. Within an hour, the team was ready. Alongside Daniel and Laura, Ryan Miller, the ship's engineer, and Grace Monroe, head of security, suited up in protective gear. Each carried tools, scanners, and weapons, though none of them truly knew what they might face. The airlock hissed open, and the four stepped onto the surface of the alien warspace. The hull was cold and rough under their boots, pitted with craters and scorch marks. Up close, the scale of the ship was even more overwhelming. It loomed above them like a sleeping giant, its sheer size dwarfing the eclipsed dawn. Laura led the way to a hatch half buried in debris. Using a plasma cutter, Ryan managed to pry it open, revealing a dark corridor beyond. "Let's move," Daniel ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. They entered cautiously, their helmet lights cutting through the thick darkness. The air inside was stale and metallic, carrying the faint scent of oil and rust. The walls were covered in the same glowing runes they'd seen outside, casting strange shadows that danced with every step. The floor was littered with broken machinery and twisted metal, evidence of some catastrophic event in the ship's past. As they moved deeper, the silence grew oppressive. There were no sounds of movement, no hum of machinery. It felt like stepping into a tomb. Yet, somehow, they couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Then, without warning, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. Startled, Grace raised her weapon, but Daniel quickly lowered it. The figure was human, or at least, it looked human. A man, gaunt and pale, dressed in tattered clothes, stitched together from scraps. His eyes widened in shock as he stared at them. "You," he whispered, his voice hoarse and trembling. "You're real." Before anyone could respond, more figures appeared behind him, stepping cautiously into the light. Men, women, children, all of them thin and hollow-eyed, their faces marked by hardship. They looked like ghosts, survivors clinging to life in the ruins of a forgotten world. Daniel exchanged a glance with Laura. Whatever they had expected to find, it wasn't this. Document Part 2. The group of humans stared at Daniel and his team, their expressions a mix of fear, confusion, and something else. Hope. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment for years, maybe even generations. The man who had first appeared stepped forward slightly, his movements cautious but deliberate. He looked at the explorers with wide eyes, his lips trembling as he tried to speak. Who are you?" he finally managed, his voice cracking from disuse. "Are you real?" Daniel lowered his weapon completely, signaling to his team to do the same. He took a step closer, his tone calm and reassuring. "We're real. My name is Daniel Hayes. We came here on our ship. It's called the Eclipse Dawn. Who are you, and where did you come from?" The man hesitated, glancing back at the others behind him. They exchanged nervous looks before he turned back to Daniel. "My name is Ethan," he said softly. We've been here for a long time. Longer than I can remember." Laura stepped forward now, her curiosity getting the better of her. "How many of you are there? How did you end up on this ship?" Ethan gestured vaguely toward the shadows behind him. "There are more of us, many more. We live in the deeper parts of the ship. As for how we got here," he paused, his face clouding with uncertainty. "It's hard to explain. Our ancestors, they were soldiers, or so the stories say. They were sent here during some kind of war, but then something happened. The ship stopped working, and we were left behind." Grace frowned, her hand still resting near her weapon. "You mean you've been stranded here? For how long?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "I don't know. Years, decades, maybe longer. Time doesn't mean much when you're just trying to survive." Ryan let out a low whistle under his breath. "This is insane. A whole group of people living inside an alien warship. How have you stayed alive all this time?" Ethan's expression hardened slightly, as though the question stung. "We adapt. We scavenge what we can from the ship. Some systems still work, enough to keep us going, but it hasn't been easy. Daniel studied the man carefully. Despite his frail appearance, there was a strength in Ethan's voice, a determination that suggested he wasn't just a victim of circumstance. You mentioned your ancestors were soldiers. Do you know who built this ship, or why? Ethan shook his head again. No, all we know is that it was made by someone powerful, someone far beyond us. We call them the Builders, but they're gone now, like everyone else. He paused, then added almost reluctantly, except for whatever hunts ships like this one. That last sentence sent a chill through the room. Grace immediately tensed, her grip tightening on her weapon. What do you mean, hunts ships? Ethan hesitated, clearly reluctant to elaborate. There are things out there, creatures, machines, I don't know, that seek out ships like this one. They destroy anything they find. That's why we stay hidden. If they knew we were here. He trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. The implication hung heavy in the air. Whatever these hunters were, they were dangerous and they might already be aware of the explorer's presence. Daniel glanced at Laura, who gave him a subtle nod. This was information they needed to take seriously. All right, he said, turning back to Ethan. We'll talk more about that later. For now, can you show us around? We need to understand what this ship is capable of and whether it poses any risks to us. Ethan nodded hesitantly. Follow me, but be careful. Not all parts of the ship are safe. With that, he turned and led them deeper into the labyrinthine corridors. The rest of the remnant, the name Ethan used for his people, followed at a distance, watching silently as the newcomers passed. Their faces were filled with a mixture of awe and suspicion, as if they weren't sure whether to trust these strangers who had suddenly appeared in their world. As they walked, Daniel couldn't help but notice the condition of the ship. While some areas were relatively intact, others were in ruins, walls collapsed, floors buckled, and ceilings sagging dangerously. Strange symbols continued to glow faintly along the walls, pulsing rhythmically as though alive. Occasionally, they would pass pieces of machinery that seemed to hum faintly. Remnants of the ship's once great power. This place is huge, Ryan muttered, looking around in amazement. It must have taken thousands of people to operate it. It did, Ethan replied quietly. Back when it was new. Now, it's just us. They eventually reached a large chamber that appeared to serve as some kind of communal area. Crude furniture made from salvaged materials filled the space, along with makeshift beds and tables. Children peeked out from behind corners, their wide eyes fixed on the explorers. Adults moved cautiously, some clutching tools or weapons fashioned from scraps. Laura knelt down to examine one of the tables, noticing carvings etched into its surface. These symbols, they matched the ones on the walls outside. Do you know what they mean? Ethan shrugged. Some of them. They tell stories about battles, about survival, but most of it is lost to us. We only know bits and pieces. Grace crossed her arms, her gaze sweeping over the room. How do you manage, without proper supplies? Food, water, medicine. We make do, Ethan said simply. The ship has reserve stores of food and water sealed away, enough to last, if we ration carefully. And we've learned to repair things when we can, but it's not enough. Not really. His words carried a weight of desperation that struck a chord with everyone. These people weren't just survivors. They were fighters, clinging to life against impossible odds. Yet there was also a sense of resilience, stubborn refusal to give up, no matter how bleak things seemed. Ryan broke the silence after a moment. So, what happens now? Are you willing to leave this place? Come with us? Ethan stiffened at the suggestion, his eyes narrowing. Leave? No. This ship is all we have. Without it, we'd die. But staying here isn't safe either, Daniel interjected gently. If what you said about those hunters is true, then you're in danger. We can protect you, take you somewhere safer. For a brief moment, Ethan looked tempted. Then his expression hardened again. You don't understand. This ship, it's not just a shelter. It's part of us. Our ancestors sacrificed everything to keep it running. We won't abandon it. The tension in the room grew palpable. Grace shifted uneasily, while Laura exchanged a worried glance with Daniel. This wasn't going to be as simple as offering help and expecting gratitude. These people had lived their entire lives aboard this ship, eking out an existence in the shadow of its mysteries. To them, it wasn't just a vessel, it was home. We're not asking you to decide right now, Daniel said diplomatically. But we need to learn more about this ship. If it's as powerful as it seems, it could pose a threat not just to you, but to everyone. Ethan nodded slowly, though his reluctance was clear. Fine, ask your questions. But remember your guests here. Don't overstep. With that uneasy agreement in place, the explorers began their investigation, in earnest. Laura focused on studying the glowing symbols, hoping to decipher their meaning. Ryan examined the ship's mechanical systems, marveling at their complexity despite centuries of neglect. Meanwhile, Grace kept a close eye on the remnant, ensuring tensions didn't boil over. As the hours passed, Daniel found himself reflecting on the situation. These people were survivors, yes, but they were also prisoners, trapped aboard a relic of a forgotten age. And while they might not realize it yet, the arrival of the Eclipse Dawn had changed everything. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. Document. Part 3. The deeper the explorers ventured into the warship, the more its secrets began to unfold. Laura led the way, her scanner beeping softly as it picked up faint energy signals emanating from the walls. The glowing symbols seemed to grow brighter the farther they went, their pulsing rhythm almost hypnotic. Ryan followed closely behind, his eyes darting between the crumbling machinery and the strange carvings etched into every surface. This place is like a maze, Ryan muttered under his breath. Every corridor looks the same. It's designed that way, Ethan replied, walking ahead of them with cautious steps. Confuse invaders, slow them down. Back when the ship was new, no one could navigate it without knowing the codes. Codes? Grace asked sharply, her hand resting on her weapon. She didn't trust Ethan completely, and she wasn't about to let her guard down in this alien labyrinth. Ethan nodded. Sequences of symbols. They unlock doors, activate systems. Without them, you're stuck. He paused and glanced over his shoulder at the group. Lucky for you, we know some of them. Daniel noticed the slight hesitation in Ethan's voice. There was something he wasn't saying, something important. But before Daniel could press him, Laura interrupted. Look at this, she said, pointing her scanner at a massive door blocking their path. It was unlike anything they'd seen. So far, sleek, metallic, and covered in intricate patterns that shifted slightly as they approached. This isn't just another corridor. It's sealed shut, but there's power running through it. Whatever's behind here, it's still active. Ethan froze, his face pale. For a moment, he seemed unsure whether to speak. Finally, he swallowed hard and said, That's the control room, or what's left of it. The control room, Daniel repeated, his interest piqued. Can we get inside? Ethan hesitated again, glancing nervously at the others. We can try, but it's dangerous. Things go wrong in there. Systems turn on by themselves. Sometimes, he trailed off, unwilling or unable to finish the sentence. Grace frowned. Sometimes what? Ethan shook his head. Just be careful. That's all I'm saying. With that cryptic warning, Ethan moved closer to the door and began tracing his fingers over the symbols carved into its surface. After a few moments, he pressed a sequence of glowing runes. The door groaned in response, metal grinding against metal as it slowly slid open. A rush of stale air escaped from within, carrying the faint scent of ozone and decay. Inside, the control room was vast, and dimly lit, dominated by rows of consoles and towering holographic displays. Most of the equipment was damaged or non-functional, but a few screens flickered weakly, displaying streams of data written in an unknown language. In the center of the room stood a massive pedestal, surrounded by broken chairs and scattered debris. Atop the pedestal rested a crystal orb, pulsating with a soft blue light. Laura stepped forward, her eyes wide with wonder. This is incredible. This must be the heart of the ship, the command center. Ryan joined her, examining the consoles with growing excitement. If we can figure out how to interface with these systems, we might be able to restore some functionality, maybe even learn more about who built this thing. But Ethan hung back, his expression dark. "Don't touch anything yet," he warned. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Ignoring his caution, Laura reached out to touch one of the flickering screens. As soon as her fingers brushed the surface, the entire room came alive. Lights flared brightly, bathing the chamber in harsh white illumination. Holograms erupted around them, swirling with images of stars, planets, and battles fought across the galaxy. Voices echoed through the room, deep, resonant tones, speaking in a language none of them understood. "What did you do?" Ethan shouted, panic rising in his voice. "I didn't mean to," Laura stammered, pulling her hand away quickly. But it was too late. The ship's systems were fully awake now, responding to their presence. Grace immediately raised her weapon, scanning the room for any sign of danger. "Everyone stay calm. Just because it's active doesn't mean it's hostile." Daniel moved closer to the pedestal, studying the glowing orb intently. "This has to be the key. Whatever controls the ship, it's tied to this." As if in response, the orb began to pulse faster, its light growing brighter. Suddenly, a deep hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. The sound was both awe-inspiring and unsettling, a reminder of the immense power contained within the ship. Ryan knelt beside one of the consoles, trying to decipher the strange symbols scrolling across the screen. "I think I can translate some of this. These logs, they're records of battles. Whole fleets wiped out, planets destroyed." "Destroyed?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. "By this ship?" Ryan nodded grimly. "It looks that way. This thing wasn't just built for defense. It was made to conquer and annihilate." Ethan stepped forward now, his face pale but determined. "That's why we never go near this place. Too much risk. If those hunters find us, they'll destroy us and anyone else unlucky enough to be nearby." Daniel turned to him, his brow furrowing. "You mentioned those hunters before. Who are they? What do they want?" Ethan hesitated, clearly reluctant to share more, but the weight of the situation forced his hand. "They're remnants of whatever wars this ship fought in. Machines, mostly, though some say they were created by the builders themselves. Their purpose is simple: hunt down ships like this one and erase them, along with anyone aboard." Grace tightened her grip on her weapon. "So we're sitting ducks." "Great. No," Ethan corrected her. "Not while the ship sleeps. As long as it stays dormant, they won't detect us. But now," he gestured toward the glowing orb, "now, they might already know." The realization hit everyone at once. By activating the ship's systems, they had potentially put themselves and the remnant in grave danger. Laura looked stricken, guilt washing over her face. I didn't know. I thought it's done," Daniel interrupted firmly. "What matters now is figuring out how to shut it down, or at least keep it hidden until we can leave." Ryan stood up, brushing dust off his hands. "Easier said than done. These systems are ancient, and most of them are fried. Even if we wanted to turn it off, I'm not sure we could." Before anyone could respond, the lights in the control room flickered violently, plunging the chamber into darkness for a brief moment. When they returned, the holograms had changed. Instead of battle scenes, they now displayed images of a planet, a desolate wasteland scorched black, its skies choked with ash and fire. Beneath the image floated a single word, written in bold letters: "Class 15 Death World." Laura gasped. That's where this ship came from. A Class 15 Death World. Daniel stared at the hologram, his mind racing. Such worlds were classified as uninhabitable places where life couldn't survive due to extreme conditions. Yet here was proof that not only had life existed there, but it had thrived enough to build something like this. How is that possible? He murmured. Ethan shrugged helplessly. We don't know. All we've been told is that our ancestors came from there. Survivors of something terrible. Something they never spoke of. The conversation was cut short as the ground beneath them trembled slightly. A low rumble echoed through the ship, growing louder with each passing second. Alarms began to blare, their shrill wails piercing the air. What's happening? Grace demanded, spinning around to scan the room. Ryan checked his scanner frantically. Something's powering up. Big time. I think we triggered more than just the control room. Ethan's face went pale. We need to get out of here. Now. Without waiting for further discussion, the group bolted for the exit. Behind them, the control room continued to come alive, lights flashing wildly and machinery worried to life after centuries of dormancy. As they raced through the corridors, the ship's engines roared to life, shaking the entire vessel. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and sections of the walls began to seal shut automatically. This way, Ethan shouted, leading them down a narrow passageway. The remnant had clearly used this route before. Crude arrows painted on the walls guided their path. Laura stumbled, but caught herself, her breathing ragged. We can't outrun this. The whole ship is waking up. We don't have a choice, Daniel snapped, urging her forward. Keep moving. Finally, they burst into a large chamber filled with the remnant. Panic spread quickly as the people realized something was wrong. Children cried, and adults scrambled to gather supplies. Preparing for the worst, Ethan pushed his way to the front of the crowd. Listen to me. Everyone needs to stay calm. We've survived worse than this. But his words did little to reassure them. Fear was etched on every face, and the ship's alarms only added to the chaos. Grace grabbed Ethan by the arm. What happens next? Do you have a plan? Ethan shook his head, his usual confidence shattered. No, we wait, and pray those hunters don't find us. As the group huddled together, the ship continued to awaken around them, its ancient systems humming with newfound energy. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. Document. Part 4. The tension aboard the warship was thick enough to cut with a knife. The remnant huddled together in the large chamber, their faces painted with fear and uncertainty. Ethan stood at the center of the group, trying to project calm, but his clenched fists betrayed his anxiety. Around him, children clung to their parents, while older members of the group whispered prayers or muttered warnings under their breath. The ship's alarms had grown quieter now, replaced by the steady hum of its ancient systems coming online. Daniel and his team stood apart from the crowd, observing the scene with a mix of concern and determination. Laura kept glancing at her scanner, which still buzzed faintly as it tracked the rising energy levels throughout the ship. Ryan crouched near one of the walls, examining a panel that had begun to glow with the same eerie blue light they'd seen earlier. Grace remained on high alert, her weapon drawn and her eyes scanning every shadow for signs of danger. We need to talk, Daniel said finally, breaking the uneasy silence. He gestured for Ethan to join him away from the others. Reluctantly, Ethan followed, leaving the rest of the remnant to murmur among themselves. What do you want? Ethan asked, his tone sharper than before. You've already done enough damage. Daniel held up a hand, trying to defuse the situation. No, things got out of control back there. But we didn't mean to cause trouble. We're just trying to understand this place and help if we can. Help? Ethan repeated bitterly. By waking up a sleeping giant? By putting us all in danger? It wasn't supposed to happen like that, Laura interjected, stepping forward. Her voice was soft but firm. We didn't know what would happen when we touched the console. None of us did. Ethan crossed his arms, his expression hardening. Ignorance doesn't change the facts. Now the ship is awake, and those hunters could be on their way. Do you even realize what that means? Grace stepped closer, her patience wearing thin. Maybe if you'd told us more about the risks, we wouldn't have made that mistake. Instead of keeping secrets, why don't you explain exactly what we're dealing with? Ethan hesitated, clearly torn between anger and the need to cooperate. After a long pause, he sighed and rubbed his temples. Fine. You want to know? Those hunters, they're machines? Fast, deadly, and relentless. They track ships like this one because they see them as weapons. Weapons capable of destroying entire worlds. Ryan frowned, his mind racing. If they're machines, how do they decide what to attack? Who programmed them? No one knows, Ethan admitted. All we've been told is that they were created by the builders, the same ones who made this ship. Maybe they were meant to protect the galaxy from threats like this. Or maybe they turned against their creators. Either way, they're still out there, and they won't stop until everything like this is gone. Daniel exchanged a glance with Laura, both of them processing the gravity of the situation. So, what happens next? He asked. Do you have any way to defend yourselves if they show up? Ethan shook his head grimly. Not really. We've survived this long by staying hidden. If the ship stays quiet, they pass us by. But now, he trailed off, gesturing toward the glowing walls and humming machinery. Now, we're exposed. Laura stepped forward, her tone urgent. Then we need to work together. There has to be something we can do to shut parts of the ship down or at least mask its energy signature. Ethan looked skeptical. Even if you could, how would you know what to turn off? One wrong move, and you might trigger something worse. He's not wrong, Ryan chimed in reluctantly. These systems are beyond anything I've ever seen. Messing with them blindly could make things 10 times worse. Grace tightened her grip on her weapon. Well, sitting around isn't going to save us. We need a plan now. As the group debated, divisions began to form within the remnant. Some of the people sided with Ethan, urging caution and warning against trusting the newcomers. Others, however, saw an opportunity. A young woman named Mia stepped forward, her voice cutting through the murmurs. They're right, she said boldly, addressing Ethan and the rest of the group. We can't keep living like this, hiding in the dark, waiting for death to find us. These people, they came here to help. Maybe they can give us a chance to survive. Ethan turned to her, his frustration evident. And what if they make things worse? What if their help gets us all killed? Mia met his gaze without flinching. What if it saves us instead? We've been stuck here for generations, clinging to scraps. Is that really living? Her words sparked a heated argument among the remnant. Voices rose as factions formed, each side shouting over the other. Daniel watched the chaos unfold, realizing that time was running out. Whatever decision they made, it needed to happen soon. Enough, he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. Fighting each other won't solve anything. Whether you trust us or not, we're in this together now. The ship is awake, and those hunters are probably already on their way. Our only hope is to work as a team. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ethan let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders slumping in defeat. All right, he said quietly. But if we're doing this, we do it my way. No reckless moves. No risking the ship unless we have no choice. Daniel nodded, agreed. Let's start by figuring out what we're working with. Ryan, can you check the ship's power core? See if there's a way to stabilize it or reduce its output. Ryan nodded and grabbed his toolkit. I'll do what I can, but I'm not making promises. Laura, Daniel continued, turning to her. Keep analyzing those symbols. If we can understand the language, We might be able to communicate with the ship's systems directly. What about me? Grace asked, her tone sharp. You stay with Ethan and the others, Daniel replied. We need someone to keep the peace and make sure no one does anything stupid. With roles assigned, the group split up. Ryan headed deeper into the ship, guided by Ethan, while Laura stayed behind to study the glowing runes covering the walls. Grace positioned herself near the entrance to the chamber, keeping a watchful eye on the remnant. Meanwhile, Daniel took a moment to think, pacing back and forth, as he tried to piece together a strategy. As the hours passed, tensions simmered, but didn't boil over. Ryan reported, finding the ship's reactor a massive, pulsating sphere of energy, encased in glass-like material. It was unlike anything he'd ever encountered, its surface covered in swirling patterns that seemed to shift as he observed them. Despite his expertise, he struggled to make sense of how it worked. This thing is alive, he muttered to himself, jotting down notes. Or at least, it feels that way. Back in the chamber, Laura made progress deciphering the symbols. She discovered that many of them corresponded to basic commands: activate, deactivate, lock, unlock, but others were far more complex, hinting at functions she couldn't yet comprehend. Her breakthrough came when she identified a sequence that appeared to control the ship's cloaking mechanisms. I think I found something, she announced, waving Daniel over. If I'm reading this right, we might be able to hide the ship's energy signature at least temporarily. That's great news, Daniel said, relief washing over him. Can you activate it? Laura hesitated. I think so, but I'll need access to the main control room again, and even then, I'm not sure how stable the system is. Before Daniel could respond, a loud clang echoed through the ship, followed by the sound of metal scraping against metal. Everyone froze, their eyes darting toward the source of the noise. What was that? Grace demanded, raising her weapon. Ethan's face went pale. They're here. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. The hunters had arrived. Document. Part 5. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed through the warship, sending chills down everyone's spines. The remnant froze in place, their faces pale with fear. Ethan clenched his fists, his jaw tight as he turned to Daniel and his team. I told you this would happen, he said, his voice low but sharp. Now, they're here. Daniel didn't waste time arguing. He stepped forward, his mind racing. Where are they? Can we see them? Ethan shook his head. Not yet. They'll come from outside first, scanning the hull, looking for weak points. Then they'll try to break in. Grace tightened her grip on her weapon, her eyes scanning the shadows. How many are there? I don't know, Ethan admitted. Sometimes it's just one. Other times, dozens. Depends on how big a threat they think we are. Ryan hurried back into the chamber, his face flushed from running. The reactor is stable for now, but I don't know how long it'll last if those things start attacking. We need to act fast. Laura spoke up, her voice urgent. If we can activate the cloaking system, maybe we can hide before they find us. But we need to get to the control room. Ethan hesitated, clearly torn. That's risky. If they detect us while we're moving, it's our only chance. Daniel interrupted firmly. We can't sit here and wait for them to tear the ship apart. After a tense pause, Ethan nodded reluctantly. Fine, follow me, but stay close and quiet. With that, Ethan led the group through the dimly lit corridors, moving as quickly and quietly as possible. Behind them, the remnants scattered, some retreating deeper into the ship, while others stayed behind to guard their makeshift homes. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the ship's ancient metal sounding like a death knell as they approached the control room. The sounds of movement outside grew louder, scraping, thuds, and faint mechanical worry. Whatever the hunters were, they were already aboard. This way, Ethan whispered, guiding them into a side corridor. He pressed a sequence of glowing runes on the wall, causing a hidden door to slide open. Inside was a narrow maintenance tunnel, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. "Through here," Ethan urged. "It leads straight to the control room, but hurry, they won't take long to find us." One by one, they crawled through the tunnel, the hum of the ship's systems growing louder with each passing second. Laura brought up the rear, clutching her scanner tightly. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to focus. They couldn't afford mistakes, not now. When they finally emerged into the control room, the space was eerily silent. The massive pedestal holding the glowing orb stood at the center, its light pulsing steadily. Ryan immediately moved to examine the consoles, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. "I'm in," he announced after a moment, "but I need Laura's help. These commands are too complex for me to figure out alone." Laura joined him, her eyes scanning the holographic displays. "Here," she said, pointing to a series of symbols. "This sequence should activate the cloaking system, but we'll need to reroute power from other systems to make it work." "Do it," Daniel ordered without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." As Ryan and Laura worked together, the rest of the group kept watch. Ethan paced nervously, his ears straining for any sign of the hunters. Grace stood near the entrance, her weapon trained on the door. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified by the oppressive silence. Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated through the ship, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy landing nearby. The floor trembled beneath their feet, and dust rained down from the ceiling. "They're inside," Ethan hissed, panic creeping into his voice. "They've breached the hull." Grace spun around, her finger hovering over the trigger of her weapon, where, before anyone could answer, a piercing screech filled the air, a high-pitched metallic wail that set everyone's teeth on edge. Moments later, the first hunter appeared in the doorway. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Sleek and insectoid, its body shimmered with an oily black sheen, reflecting the dim light in unsettling ways. Multiple jointed limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and its elongated head swiveled unnaturally, scanning the room with glowing red eyes. It moved with terrifying speed, darting forward before anyone could react. Grace fired instinctively, her weapon blasting a burst of energy toward the creature. The shot hit it square in the chest, but instead of collapsing, the hunter merely staggered backward. Its carapace absorbed most of the impact, leaving only a faint scorch mark. "It's not stopping," Grace shouted, backing away as the creature lunged again. Ethan grabbed a piece of broken machinery and hurled it at the hunter, distracting it for a split second. "Keep working," he yelled at Ryan and Laura. "We'll hold it off." Daniel rushed to Grace's side, pulling a plasma cutter from his belt. Together, they unleashed a barrage of attacks, forcing the hunter to retreat momentarily. But it wasn't alone. Two more creatures appeared in the doorway, their movements fluid and predatory. Ryan glanced up from the console, his face pale. "We're almost done. Just a few more seconds." Laura's fingers flew across the controls, sweat dripping down her forehead. "Got it?" she cried triumphantly. "Activating cloaking system now." A deep hum filled the control room as the ship's systems responded. The glowing orb atop the pedestal flared brightly, then dimmed as the lights throughout the chamber flickered and died. For a moment, everything went dark. When the lights returned, the hunters were gone. Everyone froze, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The room was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the ship's systems. "Did it work?" Grace asked, lowering her weapon cautiously. Laura checked her scanner, relief washing over her face. "Yes, the ship's energy signature is masked. They can't track us anymore." Ethan sank to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. "You did it," he said hoarsely. "You actually did it." Daniel let out a shaky laugh, running a hand through his hair. "For now at least, but we're not out of danger yet. Those things might still be aboard." Ryan nodded grimly. "And even with the cloak active, it won't last forever. We need to find a way to repair the ship or leave it entirely. Ethan looked up at Daniel, his expression conflicted. You saved us for now. But what happens next? What do you want from us? Daniel met his gaze, his tone steady. We came here to explore, to learn. But now that we've seen what this ship is capable of, we can't ignore it. If we work together, maybe we can find a way to protect both your people and ours. Ethan didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared at the glowing orb, its light casting strange shadows across his face. Finally, he sighed and nodded. All right, we'll help, but don't forget to owe us, all of us. With the immediate threat neutralized, the group began to regroup, their minds turning to the challenges ahead. The hunters were gone for now, but the ship itself remained a mystery, its secrets buried deep within its ancient systems. And somewhere in the darkness beyond, the hunters waited, patient and relentless, ready to strike again.